Welcome to the Soul Surgery Podcast. My name is Nikki Clinch, and I am your host. I am a maturation facilitator, teacher and coach, integrative holistic health counselor, breathwork facilitator, and author. I am the founder of the Academy of Maturation Coaching, the Alchemy of Being, where I train as many people as I can to become powerful spaces for human beings to come home to their authentic truth. Maturation is a powerful evolutionary process of dissolving trauma, breaking free of stuck patterns, and growing and healing at the taproot. Growing out of who we thought we were from the stories led by our past conditioning in order to grow and evolve into who we were born to be. In this podcast, I will be sharing many different things with you, opening up the doorways to my coaching sessions where you can witness with your own eyes how trauma contaminates our reality and how we can dissolve it, heal it at the root, and rewrite the story of our lives, reclaiming our power and reminding each one of us that who we are is wholeness. I will be interviewing some of the world's most prominent teachers in spirituality, healing, transformation, and human evolvement, and sharing with you my own teachings and learnings along the way. And above all, sharing with you my heart. The purpose of this podcast is to remind each one of you who you really are, to open up the doorway to a new possibility, to a new paradigm, to healing, health, transformation, and our evolvement as individuals and a species. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. One thing that you can do for me, if you find this podcast useful and if you love it, please do subscribe. And if you feel called to, leave a review, because reviews really matter. They help to spread the word and help to spread this podcast to as many people as we can. And lastly, if you have any big aha moments, any shifts, any insights in any of these episodes, please do share it with me. Share with me which episode it was, where in the episode it happened, and how it has impacted you and your life. So without further ado, let's get going. I hope you enjoy today's episode on the Soul Surgery Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode. So this month is all about relationships and intimacy. And so when I was thinking about what I was going to speak about for you in this solo episode, I realized that actually what I really wanted to share was all the blind spots in relationship that have been uncovered in my world that has really surprised me. So in essence, this is a personal sharing of my own insights, but really this is on relationships on a much, much deeper level that we just don't get taught about. We don't get educated on. The stuff that we don't hear and we don't get told about relationship. And I think if more people knew this, then maybe there would be more longer term, fulfilling, nourishing, meaningful relationships in the world. And maybe there would be less divorce and separation and conflict. So I thought that this would be useful for you guys to hear and to learn. And just for me to share it with you. And just to say that I share really deeply about the journey with my husband and the breakdown and the separation and all the really big insights that I had in that. I share all of that in my book. My book, Surrender, is out on the 1st of June. You can pre-order it now on Amazon and everywhere that sells books. It's called Surrender. And it really is a process. It takes you through the process of dissolving and piercing the illusion of how you are experiencing reality and allowing you to start shifting beyond your story. it takes you through that deep and profoundly powerful process of your own maturation. And alongside that teaching, I share my own personal journey and story of the insights that I had in the breakdown of my marriage and then the shifts that occurred for me in the rebirth of my marriage. So, this is going to be a relationship 101. So, let's begin. Up until I met my husband, I have had a number of, I would say, in love relationships. I realize now with hindsight, I am a serial, or I was a serial 2-yearer. Every single relationship I had ever been in always seemed to end around the 2-year mark or just under the 2-year mark. It didn't matter how in love I was. It didn't matter how good it was. It didn't matter how perfect it seemed. Every single one, when I look back on it, around the coming up to the 2-year mark, started to break down. And when I say it started to break down, I mean issues started to show up, arguments started to happen. And I'm going to go deeper into what my experience that continually happened in every relationship. This would start to occur for me around the 2-year mark. So that in itself is really, really interesting. And when I dove deeper into that, and by the way, when I met my husband, when I met Kev, I told him this. And around the 2-year mark, we had issues. And I would say that's really when the issues really started to begin. So when I dove deeper into this, and this is the first thing that nobody tells you, I realized that what happened for me just before I turned 2. And I realized that just before I turned 2, or around that time, was around the time that my father left. And my father left, and he actually left my mum before I was born, came back. They tried to make it work. I was just a baby. And he finally and eventually packed his bags and left for good. And I think I was just under 2. Now, that's the first aha moment that I want to highlight. Very, very commonly, I'm going to, not even very commonly, these core incidents, these core moments of experience, these core life moments that we live through as children, it seems like they happen in the past, and that means it's still out there, back there in the past now. It's not here, it's back there. Well, no, that's not true, because the moment that we experience something, it becomes a memory, it becomes a concept. And that concept then colors how I and you and all of us see reality and experience reality. And something in the moment of my father leaving, of course, that had a major impact on me. It was a big experience for me as a little baby. Even though I was a baby, I didn't have words yet. Maybe I had some words, but not a lot. The experience that I had of him leaving at that age, the moment I had that experience, it becomes memory and it becomes a concept. And that concept for me, men leave me. I'm not loved. I'm not wanted. I will be abandoned. I can't trust. Love's not safe. Whatever it is for you, and each one of us will have created a different story, a different feel, that colors our reality. And so every single relationship I have ever had, around just under the 2-year mark, it's not even conscious. My whole body and being, my mind and my body is activated like I'm reliving the same moment in time. And I am. It's not in the past, it's here. It's imprinted in me. And so everything is kind of activating. All the wires are going off, everything's going off. And it's like, I will be abandoned now. And so, how does that then impact how I behave, how I think, how I feel? I start finding problems in my partner. I start protecting myself around being abandoned. I'll probably start, blocking my heart, finding ways to not love, finding ways to pick fights. There are a million and a billion survival strategies in which we can and we do act out and behave in reaction to the activation of this past story that is imprinted, and it feels real. It doesn't feel like I'm feeling something from the past. It feels like it's happening now. And it feels like it's about him. And so all these all these activations are like firing off inside of me, and lo and behold, I find reasons that this person isn't right for me, or I pick fights. And I'm not just blaming me. It takes two to tango, but I'm just speaking my side. It always takes two to tango, by the way. Always. And that's another thing I'm going to dive into. And so for my side of the street, I'm already finding the problems. He's not good enough, or he doesn't communicate, or he breathes this way, or he never shows up for me this way. And they do occur as real problems, but I'm also looking for them. I'm looking for the evidence. I'm looking for the evidence to back up this way that I experience relationship, the way that I have identified and attached myself to relationship and love with men. And so that's the first thing I wanted to highlight. The experiences that took place for us in our childhood, if we have not worked on them, if we have not become aware of them, acutely aware of them, they will live our life. If the unconscious is left unconscious, it will live our life and we will call it fate. That's Carl Jung's quote, and it is true. And so up until I'm 33 years old, every relationship I've ever had ended around just under 2.5. Now, there are multiple different reasons why they ended. One of them was because we started having really terrible fights and it just was really not healthy. Another one was because he dumped me. The one before, I had an affair, like multiple different reasons. The details are different. And so, we can kind of prove it to ourselves. Oh, there's no correlation. It's just a coincidence. Well, the consistent factor is that I was there the whole time. What is the consistent factor? The consistent factor is that you are there. And so whatever the actual detail or reason is, which we will focus on, what's really profoundly important to pay attention to is what was going on inside of you. And when we start to see these repeated patterns, it's like, woof, what's actually going on inside of me? And so that's the first thing I want to say. It's like, how many times have you been in a relationship where you have had an absolute urge to just get out, done, out of there? or you've had an absolute urge to just pick fights all the time, or whatever, there is some kind of repeated cycle going on, that's where it's really interesting to look at. So that's the first thing that I found really profound. And then hear this. When my husband left, when we finally separated, which was after 5 years, when he finally left and he left the house, this is mind blowing. I realized that my son was exactly the same age as I was when my dad left. He was 1.5, just under 2. And my daughter was exactly the same age as I was when my father remarried. Now, how is that for a coincidence? And so it was very apparent to me that there was a real rewriting of the story opportunity here. And there always is if you're willing to look deep enough. And so I'm sharing this one first because I think we inherently get we obsessively focus on what the other one is doing or what is happening in the relationship, which is important, by the way. But we focus only on that. We focus so much on, well, he doesn't speak to me right, or he doesn't love me, or he doesn't listen to me, or he doesn't, or she doesn't. If you're he or she doesn't listen to me, she doesn't love me, she doesn't pay attention. We focus so much on what he or she is doing or not doing. And then we really believe that if he or she changes, or if I change this in the relationship, or if I could just get another one, or maybe there's someone better out there who doesn't do this annoying thing, this habit. And so we go and look elsewhere, or we try and change the moving parts inside the relationship or your partner. And then somehow nothing really changes and we come back to the same pain, or you're having the same fight, or you're back in the same dynamic. Why? Well, what's the consistent factor? You are there. What can we look at inside of ourselves that we are bringing to the present moment in time that is generating or allowing us to experience intimacy and relationship in the way in which we do? What cycle is being activated that wants to, like a magnet, repeat itself? And it is like a magnet. It was magnetic. The pull to repeat the cycle. My children's father leaving at the same age I experienced both key points of abandonment. Even though I've done a lot of work on myself, even though my husband and I are good people, even though we're good parents, the magnetic pull to repeat the cycle is real. And it's unconscious until it becomes conscious. And so if there's a repeated cycle going on for you in how you are in relationship, or how your relationships end up for you, I would pay attention to that. Really look at what happened for you at that age, at that time frame when you were that old. If you're always maybe your partner's always having an affair, like at a certain time, or when it all began, when all the problems began, how long into the relationship when all the problems began, how old were you? And what was happening then in that point of time in your life? Really, really interesting inquiry. The second thing I want to kind of blow up, which I think is, I've literally in 21 years, 22 years of doing work on myself, I'd never heard this before, but it blew my mind and it is so accurate. The experience that I have of myself in relationship directly mirrors my relationship with my mother in childhood. The experience that I have of myself in relationship directly mirrors the experience that I had with my mother in childhood. And I'll speak about it for you. The experience that we have of ourselves in relationship directly mirrors our relationship with our mother. The relationship with our mother is the core relationship with intimacy. That's the first one. That's the original one. Besides source, that is the original one for us, all of us. And so let me break this down. Instead of focusing on he never listens to me, or she always cuts me off, or she always has an affair, or he doesn't trust me, which is the problems, and they are problems, they can be painful, but we focus so much on the problem and trying to fix the problem. I want to invite you to get really, really clear on how you experience yourself inside relationship. When I started doing this for myself, I realized that how I felt inside my marriage when we were having problems, I felt lonely. I felt my needs couldn't be met. I felt longing. I felt there was no hope. I felt that I was never seen or really heard. And when I got really honest, and actually I wrote it down so I could see it like in front of me outside of my mind, it was identical to how I felt as a little girl inside my household around my mama, who, by the way, I love with all my heart. That's the gift of doing this work. But that's how I felt as a little girl. And here I am 41 years later, and I'm in a marriage, and that's how I feel now. Why? Because the imprint of our experience with intimacy, our core experience with intimacy, the original relationship, we take that with us everywhere we go. And so we think it's them. We think it's him and her, or the way they speak, or the tone of the voice, or the actions they make. And they are real. And yes, that we need to work on that too. But inherently, we bring the memory and the imprint in which we experienced our original intimate relationship, which is with mama. And we bring that into all our relationships. And so sometime eventually after the honeymoon phase wears off and the in-loveness wears off, which is really just a cocktail of an enormous amount of hormones. I mean, if you listen to the episode with Michaela Boehm a few weeks before this one, you'll hear it really is like a hormone explosion. When all of that is worn off, what's left? What's left is you and another human being having to learn and create intimacy together. And what are you going to bring with you when you are trying to create intimacy? You're going to bring with you the imprint that you have already with intimacy. And so your past, your original experience of intimacy is then getting entangled with your experience here in the present with this relationship you're in. And there's an entanglement going on. And that entanglement is what lives your relationship. And so my entanglement was love and intimacy equals being alone, needs not met, unheard, can't be my true self, and I'm going to be abandoned. So, pretty much that sums up how I have always already ended up feeling in relationship. And this has to be in long-term relationship, by the way. So the beginnings of relationship are so hormonal and the in love phase that you don't get to this part if you don't stick around long enough, or if they don't stick around long enough. And so if you haven't been able to stick around or have a relationship long enough to even hit this point, then that's also saying something, and we're going to look at that. But if you do stick around long enough for the honeymoon phase to wear off, the hormonal cocktail to wear off, and that's really when the relationship begins, it is very likely that you are going to end up feeling the same way you felt in your relationship with your mama. And so, why is it important to know this? Well, firstly, understanding something doesn't change anything. So I'm sharing this with you not so that you can hear me and understand it conceptually, but really so that you can go into your life now and write down, take a piece of paper and a pen and get super radically honest with yourself and write down how you exactly experience being inside relationship. I always end up feeling unheard, unmet, abandoned, unloved. They're going to leave me. Like, write this down, get super honest with yourself. And when you look at it, ask yourself, feel into it, let it into your heart, let it into your body. Is this how I felt when I was a little girl or a little boy? Now, understanding it is not enough to change it, but seeing it, like really seeing it in yourself, not as a concept, not as something I'm saying, Nikki said this. No, taking what I'm saying and looking in your own life and inquiring in your own self. Why? So that you can bring insight and awareness and consciousness to what you couldn't see before. And when you can bring consciousness to the unconscious, there's the beginning of being able to dissolve it, to heal it, to release it. When I saw this in myself, I realized that all those years I had focused on my partner. If only he changed this, if only they did this, and if they said this, and if they changed that, and they held this back, and they treated me differently, all this stuff, which felt real, but nothing ever changed. It was like going round and round in a hamster wheel. It was only when I really saw that the experience that I was constantly having was an identical mirror to my experience of being in my childhood with my mama. It was only when I saw that I started to see even more. I started to see that if that is how I experience being in relationship, and that is how I experienced and saw relationship, because where we're coming from colors what we see and how we see. How did that then impact my behavior? How did that then impact my breathing? How did it impact my body language? I noticed that, as a little girl, I had a certain dynamic with my mum. And I noticed that with my partner, he could make just like a little face, or he could turn his mouth up some way, or maybe he'll sit funnily one day, or I don't know, these are silly examples, but that I'm kind of making it trivial for a reason. It could be anything. And I will react and get triggered as if I'm back as a 4-year-old with my mama. Maybe I'll hold my breath. Maybe I'll tighten my shoulders. Maybe my jaw will tighten. Maybe I'll start not saying things about myself in case that they'll leave me. There are a million and a billion little strategic survival ways in which we react. And that reaction has an impact that then creates a certain field that I'm giving out. And then he reacts to that because he's also human. And by the way, this is universal. All human beings experience relationship as a mirror to how you experienced it with your original intimate relationship. All. And so how I then behave then triggers him, and then he behaves a certain way and it triggers me, and and the whole thing kicks off. And that's why we end up having problems. That's why it's so common that patterns will repeat themselves. The very patterns you were trying to get away from, the very patterns that you thought you'd solved, the very issues and patterns that you never wanted to have to deal with and see again. That's why I chose this one. He's not like that. And here we are again. Why? Because it's not about him or you. It's about the field in which you are coming from that is imprinted by your original relationship with your mother. Now, this doesn't sound romantic or fairy tale-ish in any way, which is probably why it wasn't sold to us, like in the Disney movies and on the magazines and all the beautiful rom-com movies that I love to watch. It doesn't get sold to us. Why? Because it's not attractive. If you find out about all this stuff before you go in, who's going to want to get into a relationship? So, we kind of need the hormonal stuff to pull us in. Oh, I'm so in love, and that's so amazing. And this is going to be the fairy tale forever and ever and ever. And then that wears off and, you're like, boom, where's all the love gone? Well, no, the love hasn't gone. This is just when it begins. This is when the real work begins. This is when intimacy begins. Into me see. Into me see. I see you, not what you're doing, not what's being projected on you by my story, not what you're not doing, but can I really see you beyond the story? And can I allow you to see me beyond the story? Can I allow myself to see myself this deeply? And then the third big kind of aha moment, which was recent actually, for me to learn this, is that the relationship itself is its own entity. There's you, there's him or her, and then there's the relationship. And the relationship itself is happening as one. It's not separate. It's not he's doing this and she's doing that, or she's doing this and she's doing that, or he's doing this and he's doing that. It's not, but that's what we focus on. The relationship itself is its own entity, and it's happening simultaneously. I'm getting I'm behaving in a way in which I learnt about intimacy imprinted with a relationship with my mother, and so is my partner, and they're behaving in a way in which they experienced relationship with their mother in a core relationship with intimacy. And then when and when I behave in a way that triggers them, they immediately simultaneously trigger me, and it is literally like a dance that is happening in unity. And so we focus so much on, well, what are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing? Well, actually, what they're doing and what you're doing is simultaneous. You know, one of the biggest things that my husband and I discovered in our breakthrough, when things got really, really bad, we were fighting a lot. Terrible, terrible fights. Like his heart, like just completely broken. We just couldn't see or hear each other. And we would both say we were living our worst nightmare. It was the very thing that we never wanted to be around. And what a coincidence. Both of us grew up in households with a lot of fighting. When we had our breakthrough and the rebirth, and we're now literally in a new relationship, and I can say that is the truth. Nearly 2 years down, year and a half down the line since we renewed our vows, it is a new relationship. What we discovered was that when we didn't fight, when we would usually, or the points that we weren't getting triggered by each other, or the points that would normally kick off into an argument, but we weren't. At the beginning, we would both find that excruciatingly uncomfortable. Sounds ridiculous, right? We would actually look at each other and go, wow, this is really uncomfortable. Because the dynamic itself that was moving as one, it wasn't just him and me doing this, him doing this, me doing this. It was happening as one. And it was part of the story. When that started to dissolve, and then it wouldn't happen the way that we were used to, it felt more uncomfortable than being peaceful and happy. Like we were more used to the drama because that's how we experienced it in the household as children. And so I realized I was focusing so much on him. If he changed this, if he did that, he was focusing on me. If she did this, if she did that, but nothing really ever changed. What really started to create the shifts is when we saw that he had to behave in a certain way, because that's how I only know intimacy. I only know myself as the one that doesn't have her needs met and feels a deep longing and is lonely. And so, of course, he has to show up in a way that doesn't meet my needs and da, 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 da. And he has this fear, I'm not going to speak for him, around his mother. And of course, I have to show up in that way. And do you see, it's like happening simultaneously. And we don't get taught this stuff. It's very, very complex. But when you can start to see it, when you bring consciousness and awareness to it, that it's happening simultaneously, both of you equally, simultaneously participating and living and reactivating something from the past, when you see it, it's mind-blowing, because that's the beginning of being able to start shifting it and dissolving it. You literally have to grow out of that relationship. You literally grow out of who you thought you were inside relationship. Maturation, growing out of who you thought you were into who you were born to be. You literally have to grow out of it. And you can't grow out of it until you have full consciousness of it first. So these are 3 big blind spots that we never get told about. You don't get taught this stuff, but these are like 3 major things that create big, big, big problems in relationships. And either we leave, we have affairs, we shut down from each other, we go into resignation, we close our hearts, we leave and we try to find someone else, and then it happens again, and then it happens again, and then the resignation sinks even deeper, and we numb out more and more from the possibility of really deeply fulfilling intimacy and relationship. If you listen to the episode before, my husband and I speak together. We are coming up to 10 years, and I can vouch for myself, and I know he feels the same. 10 years in, I feel like we're only just really getting started on how deep and beautiful the love can be. So much better than the in love phase. So much better than the fairy tale, because it's integrated and rooted, where both of you are allowed to be your full, whole individual selves, free of the imprints and the entanglements from your past. And that is why Eckhart Tolle says, the purpose of relationship, or the purpose of marriage or long-term relationship, is not to make each other happy, but for spiritual transformation. And I do vouch for that. It's not just for the romance. This is for our evolution, for our maturation. My husband can have the possibility of healing right at the taproot, his original relationship with intimacy, by being with me, and the same goes for me. I can heal the core learning of intimacy by being with him. And if that isn't the greatest gift of love there is, then I don't know what is. So I hope that you guys find this useful. I hope it made sense. Please share with me any insights, any aha moments, any points of healing that came for you. Share with me. You can DM me on Instagram, or write a comment under the post on Instagram, write a comment under the YouTube channel, send me an email from my website, subscribe to Soul Surgery, and leave a review, because I want to hear from you. I believe that relationships are the root to all transformation. And this isn't just your in-love relationships. This is relationships with friendships. This is relationships with our parents. This is relationships in general. If we don't learn how to have deeper, more authentic, meaningful relationships with each other, then it will jeopardize our ability to evolve. So this is core and super important. So I hope that you found this useful. Thanks for listening, guys. It's been a joy sharing with you. This is the Soul Surgery Podcast.